Gottingen Street was the place to go. It was the shopping district of Halifax. Everybody came.
I would describe the North End as probably one of the most vibrant, dynamic, growing parts of Halifax.
It went from destination to being a place where you were told not to go, to now, current day, being the place where everyone wants to be.
Vibrant, beautiful, friendly. Right? Summertime, like I said, you used to see everybody hanging out on this street, right? Socializing, talking. But it also had this stigma that came with it.
If you walked up Gottingen Street, even if people didn't know your actual name, everybody said hello. It was like, hello, how are you today? Now, who are you, dear? And just stop you on the street.
You know, Gottingen Street was the first downtown, you know. Years ago was actually the shopping district for the Halifax area.
Gottingen didn't always have a bad rep. When I lived in my town, my little town of Truro, Gottingen Street was the place to go.
When they start putting in, I would say, low-income housing, which was a benefit to the community, but people tend not to want to be a part of that, right? And, you know, they started developing Halifax more, and, you know, so they relocated, a lot of businesses relocated.
But over time, for all kinds of reasons, and people have attributed to different things. For example, the Cogswell Exchange that we're talking about today, how the city designed the movement of business, economics again, out of the Gottingen Street area. I remember well when that took place, and I don't think the community even knew it was taking place. It happened so fast, and there was no community of the long-term residents. They didn't even get a chance to voice their opinion on what they thought about this change.
Homeowners up that farther north didn't want to be associated with the name Gottingen Street, all right? You know, and that's what a lot of people felt, right? Whether that was the case or not, don't know, but a lot of people felt that way and felt that it was an injustice, right? So it did impact, right? So what it ended up doing was sort of dividing and shrinking the communities.
So I used to walk up Gottingen to St. Joseph and McKay as a kid, and I always wondered why, when you got to like the intersection where Gottingen turns to Noble Lee, why that happened. I never thought much about it, but it's when I got older when I actually realized that divide happened due to petitions and through council, and then actually becoming councillor, I had residents contact me and say, do you know the history around it? And then seeing council minutes and notes and in some documents, it made me feel upset thinking of the things that were said at the time during those meetings. It was a community, and still is a community. Two sides of it. There was the media side, where they tagged it as a place not to go. Gottingen Street was what the media called Gottingen Street. It was a positive place for me because it was close knit. But there also was a lot of things happening. There was violence, there was drugs, addictions, but it was, you know, never felt fearful to be in my home.
Because of the low-income areas where everybody there was drug dealers, right? And that was not the case, right? However, media portrayed it that way, right? So it was constantly under siege in the media, right? You start hearing and reading about the bad things that take place in community, no different than any other community within HRM, right? You know, that happens everywhere. But for some reason, there's a lot of focus on this immediate area, right?
The fact that when people moved into this area and there was a mixture, for example, of housing, it was quite commonplace for people of various incomes to live in the same neighborhood, or people in the same apartment, or in the same public housing unit. Because sometimes it angers me that people think that places like public housing, like Uniacke Square, was only poor people, but there was a mixture of people, which made it culturally diverse, economically diverse, and people creating real community. Over time, the city, in its quotes unquote wisdom, decided that it wasn't the kind of place that they wanted to develop.
So North Branch Library, which is a huge pillar in the community, growing up there, Marcus James, who's been there since I was a kid, going there and seeing faces that you recognized, and faces that lived in the community, made you feel welcome.
You know, what Lindell did was unite a community with his election, right? And so that's a start. And I see that as being very, very positive. And I think most residents in this area would agree with that. Right? So that's a start. You now have somebody born and raised in this area who really cares, who gives his heart and soul to the community, right? That now represents you in the old boys club, right?
We have to be at the table. You know, growing up, government was always the big bad person. You know, there's been lots of historic issues when it comes to government. You know, you should use Africanville as an example. That was the city directly related to the demise of it. But at the same time, if we're not at the table helping make the decisions, then the decisions will have the communities and different voices left out of it.
There was a lot of really bad city planning decisions made. Don't forget, the North End was physically cut off from downtown and the rest of the city.
Well, I think first of all, you have to fully acknowledge the wrongs. In order to move forward, you have to fully acknowledge them. There has to be conversation behind that, right? With community, right? And you have to generate ideas and thoughts and concerns and issues through those conversations with residents of that particular area. And if you don't do that, nothing you do is going to work.
So you can do all you want to do, you can talk all you want to talk, but if you're not changing the social economic conditions in the community from the grassroots up, then we still have the problem.
You have young people here who simply want to work, but there's no work available to them.
There's that separation feeling of there's businesses and residents, and then there's upper north and further north. And that's just a historic ingrained feeling. At the end of the day, we're all the same, you know, community, but those are just historic things that are ingrained either through media or through just passed down through generations. And you know, it's how do you change that narrative? We're all in this together.